January the 1st, 1982. Coast to Coast is born. We were to cover thousands of stories. Some made you laugh, some made you cry. We also reported 2 wars. Who would have thought early in 1982 that a huge task force would set sail from here for the Falkland Islands at such short notice? And then again, 10 years later, set sail for the Gulf War. Just 2 of the major stories that have happened in the South in an extraordinary period of change in the region. We start our unique record of the TVS Years back in 1982 as that task force prepared for war.
HMS Invincible sails out of Portsmouth Harbour at the head of a naval task force prepared for a state of war. It's been this way for centuries as British fleets have left their home port to wage wars and fight battles. Today, England expects once more, as the biggest naval task force assembled since Suez, heads for the Falkland Islands.
But the British forces did have considerable casualties. 2 Portsmouth destroyers, HMS Sheffield and HMS Coventry, were lost. Many of those who died aboard the ships and during the battle for the islands left families in the south. Portsmouth was the scene for another historic event in 1982 with the raising of the Mary Rose from the Solent. Henry VIII's flagship sank in 1545 on her way to fight the French with a loss of up to 700 lives. The raising of the ship caused a few anxious moments and sent a royal pulse pounding.
But it did leave a nasty feeling in the tummy, I can tell you. The important thing is to be British and not panic. So we didn't.
The Mary Rose was housed in a museum at Portsmouth, close to the final resting place of HMS Victory. An astonishing array of artifacts now fills the museum, all perfectly preserved in the Solent silt. Also in 1982, this garage was one of the first to chalk up the £2 gallon. Vietnamese boat people were allowed into the country and housed at a camp at Sopley in Hampshire. Many later settled in the south. Miss World contestants toured the region amid a row over their fur coats. The Greenham Common Peace Women prepared for a decade of protests at the American base in Berkshire. And these punks tried to shake off their rebellious image by growing veg for the elderly.
This tabletop grocery is a weekly event at the Pensioners' Luncheon Club, and it's obvious the Technicolor tearaways mix well with the blue rinse set.
I think that's gorgeous. Look, I think I'll have our next turkey for
Oh, they're very nice boys, though.
The fastest man on Earth in 1983. Project Thrust, built on the Isle of Wight, powered through the Nevada desert at an average speed of 633 miles an hour. At one point in the run, he touched 650 miles an hour.
At the end of the final timed run, the car must be driven twice within the hour. The atmosphere was crackling with excitement. Then came the official statement. Richard Noble had broken the land speed record. He was, for a few seconds, the proudest man alive. Just how does it feel to hold the world land speed record?
Well, I don't know yet. We've only had it a few minutes. But I just can't believe it, actually.
Can you try and explain to me, why did you do it in the first place?
Well, I suppose for Britain and for the hell of it.
This DeLorean model was on show in the South with its famous gull wings. It didn't have thrust speed, but the car did achieve time travel later in the Back to the Future films. Celebrities abounded in the South in 1983. George Best was back in training with Bournemouth, but press reports claimed he kept going missing.
Well, I had a personal problem, not me, you know, someone very close to me passed away, you know, and I just felt, you know, I wasn't really in the right frame of mind to come back. You know, if it had been any other footballer in the world who had lost someone, you know, it would have been expected for them not to be there, not to train or play. But because it's me, everyone says I've gone missing.
And Bo Derek made a surprise appearance in the New Forest to work on her latest film, Bolero. Steve Harris got our interview.
Do you sometimes find that the pressures of being a star and a worldwide sex symbol sometimes get a bit too much for you?
No, I mean, I don't live, my private life, I don't live in the public all the time. The public has been very kind to me, very nice. I find no trouble. I mean, sometimes it's inconvenient. You can't really go to museums and things like that like you would like to sometimes. But the public is so nice and so kind to me, and so, I mean, it's more pleasant to walk out and see people smiling.
The Pereira family from Bishop's Waltham in Hampshire fought a campaign to avoid deportation to India.
There is no comparison between India and the United Kingdom. Over here, if you're prepared to work, you can obviously start afresh, but you can't start afresh in India.
To share.
However, after a long campaign supported by the people of Bishop's Waltham, the Home Office relented and the family were allowed to stay. Also in 1983, there was Mrs. Thatcher. Duffel coats were all the rage for Michael Foot and his supporters. Princess Diana and Prince Charles visited Romsey Abbey for the christening of Lord and Lady Romsey's daughter, Alexandra. Tragedy for the family was to follow with the death of their second daughter, Leonora, from cancer. In 1983, you had to belt up. No excuses. In sport, Brighton reached the 1983 FA Cup final. A neat headed goal by Gordon Smith. And this effort from Gary Stevens earned them a replay. But in the dying seconds, Gordon Smith could have become a hero. In the replay, Manchester United turned on the style, and this Brian Robson goal paved the way for a 4-0 win. And Corbière, trained by Jenny Pittman at Lambourne in Berkshire, romped home in the Grand National.
Drop in for tea? All right, here we go.
There were, of course, some hair-raising moments in the studio. An intrepid Miss Sheridan enjoyed tea with Khaled Aziz. High tea, of course.
And remember, you saw it first on Television South.
Tragedy in 1984, the Brighton bomb. Planted by the IRA, 4 people died and 32 were injured in the first attempt to blow up the British government since Guy Fawkes. The Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, escaped unhurt. Here, Harvey Thomas, the conference organiser, is rescued after spending an hour under tons of rubble.
At the Grand Hotel itself, scaffolding is shoring up parts of the building in danger of collapse, and a mobile crane has been brought in to help firemen make it safe. Forensic experts now believe the 20-pound bomb was placed behind panelling in the bathroom of rooms 628 or 629. Guests who occupied those 6th floor rooms before the conference are now being sought by detectives.
A guest who had signed himself in as Roy Walsh before the conference sparked off one of the biggest manhunts in Britain. Later, Patrick McGee, who planted the bomb, was given 8 life sentences. The dock strike strangled ports throughout the country, including Southampton. Although dockers at Poole and Portsmouth defied the strike call, the Southampton men were adamant that they deserved a better deal.
When it comes down to their gut feeling, and there is a picket line there, I think the docker has got respect for that.
Management, however, wanted the men back and offered what they called an invitation to work. Regular shipments of produce, such as tomatoes, was halted, but growers in the Channel Islands chartered Hercules aircraft to carry their tomatoes to Herne Airport. Although the Falklands War was over, tension in the region remained high. Britain sent out regular patrols, and Coast to Coast booked a place on HMS Exeter's voyage in 1984.
2 years after the end of the Falklands conflict and the build-up of the British land forces, the Navy is still playing a vital defence role. As she patrols the South Atlantic west of the islands, her radar and other electronic devices are on constant alert, just in case, despite the recent lessening of tension, the Argentines decide to strike again.
Gemma Knight from Lower Earley in Reading urgently needed a liver transplant. Gemma's parents launched an appeal for cash to send her to America, and Steve McDonnell went to Pittsburgh with the family.
It's very emotional, you know, you sort of, after all that time, it's hard to believe that she actually had it. And you just look at her and her eyes sort of kept opening and then going back. She knew we were there. It was good.
And this is Gemma today, 8 years on, after making a full recovery. A vicar at Horsted Canes in Sussex, codenamed Archangel, kept in touch with his parishioners by CB radio.
Let's see if Rabbit's around. Rabbit, 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 this is Archangel on the CB in Horsted Canes. Do you copy? Over.
Coast to Coast did have its problems, both on location and in the studio. This crew car wouldn't budge after becoming wedged on a lump of concrete, and even the red-socked reporter Nigel Burwood failed to free it.
Nigel is training as a navvy.
Well, in Coast to Coast tonight...
In the studio, new recruit Fern Britton was coping well with our scripts until this rehearsal.
And as Europe's largest aquarium gets ready to open at Southsea, I'm sorry.
That's my bit you've just been reading straight. Anybody can do it.
And co-presenter Fred Dinenage thought this stunt would be as easy as riding a bike.
Give them an applause. Well done, Fred.
The battle for Stonehenge made the big news of 1985. Hundreds of travellers descended on the ancient Wiltshire monument. The previous year had marked the 11th Stonehenge Festival. 30,000 people turned up for a celebration of freedom, or, as some believed, anarchy. The police were quickly on the scene. This fracas at Cholderton became known as the Battle of the Beanfield.
Leave your vehicles and walk towards the police officers.
Are you still there, boy?
Despite the huge number of arrests, many travellers were awarded compensation by the courts. Earlier in the year, the weather had dominated the news. For some parts of the region, conditions were the worst since 1963. Then there was a spectacular crash at the Farnborough Air Show, and no injuries. 1985 saw a breakthrough for the consumer. Tesco's were among the first of the big stores to list ingredients in their products, and they also included details about fat content and other information aimed at the health conscious. But not everyone paid too much attention.
If it tastes all right to my way of thinking, then it's all right to, you know, it's all right.
Miners leader Arthur Scargill came south to tell us about imminent pit closures.
The draconian measures that the Cold War are inflicting in every pit in Britain will undoubtedly bring with it more and more conflict and problems.
The financier Alex Herbage from Sutton Scotney near Winchester ran into financial trouble, and he also ran into some angry creditors. Mr. Herbage is now languishing in an American jail, having been found guilty of multi-million-pound fraud. The new Ark Royal was commissioned in Portsmouth by the Queen Mother. Walker Wingsail, the Hampshire company, showed off its futuristic designs. The Sinclair C5, though, didn't quite catch on. Schools in the south joined the computer revolution.
For the last few years, and we've achieved that.
And in sport, Laurie McMenemy left Southampton after the club's most successful spell ever, during which they won the FA Cup. But where would he go now?
What about Sunderland? I mean, the papers this morning are saying that Sunderland want you and they'll give you Godfather-type money to go there.
Sunderland?
Yeah.
Well, no, I'd rather not be committed to anything in particular. I haven't seen any newspapers for a while.
Shortly afterwards, he did jet off to Sunderland in a blaze of publicity, but then took flight when things didn't go according to plan.
A September evening in 1986, a country estate in the New Forest village of Fordingbridge. The Cleaver family were enjoying dinner at their Hampshire mansion. 5 people were murdered that evening. The victims were burnt alive inside Burgate House. Mr. Joseph Cleaver, his wife Hilda, their son Thomas, and daughter-in-law Wendy, as well as their live-in nurse Margaret Murphy.
This was a brutal murder, a very vicious attack on these 5 people, very vicious.
How would you describe it in your realm of experience?
I would say that this is probably as bad as any murder you're likely to find.
The gang leader, the Cleavers' handyman George Stevenson, was given 6 life sentences for the murders. Another sordid case for police to solve, this time in the Wild Park at Brighton. The brutal murders of 9-year-old Karen Hadaway and Nicola Fellows, also 9. A local man, Russell Bishop, was arrested and charged with both murders. However, the jury found him not guilty.
I ain't gonna hide my face. I haven't done nothing wrong to hide my face for. I don't keep out of anybody's way.
Later, Bishop was arrested after a young girl was abducted at the White Hawk estate in Brighton and driven to the Devil's Dyke beauty spot where she was left for dead. Bishop was jailed for life, for kidnap and attempted murder. 1986 marked the 50th anniversary of the Spitfire. A display here at Southampton Airport. And an even older aircraft put on this display at Middle Wallop, but the landing wasn't quite textbook. Unleaded petrol became available at your local pumps. It was a bit cheaper in 1986. Sarah Ferguson from Dummer in Hampshire became the Duchess of York when she married Prince Andrew in Westminster Abbey. Friends, unfortunately not invited on the big day, contented themselves with coverage on the small screen. While everything in the York's garden was rosy, a variety of products carried the Fergie name. Shoppers tried out a Fergie perfume. Fleet Street picked up the scent and followed it mercilessly until the end. In sport, Roger Black was a double gold medalist at the European Championships in Stuttgart. Then there was the Miss Lovely Legs competition at Bewley. But wouldn't this sort of competition anger feminists?
One thing you must do is not take it too seriously. I think as long as you remember it, it's fun, it's good to look at, it's entertaining, and bear that in mind, I don't think there's any harm for anybody.
(1987) Savernake Forest, a nightmare for the people of Hungerford, was about to begin. Susan Godfrey was taking her 2 young children for a picnic. She was shot in front of them by Michael Ryan. Ryan, later described as a lonely man devoted to his mother, then drove from the forest to Hungerford and his mother Dorothy's home in South View. He shot her and set the house on fire. A massive police operation failed to prevent Ryan killing 16 people that day.
Still shooting.
Yes, did you say from the school area? Jonagont School. We believe it's Jonagont School they came from.
Ryan took refuge at the Jonagont School, where he eventually shot himself. One of Ryan's victims was local PC Roger Brereton. The market town of Hungerford would be scarred for decades to come. No one would ever know why Michael Ryan carried out Britain's worst ever shooting tragedy. One of the most severe storms to hit the south since 1703 struck in October 1987. Technically, it wasn't a hurricane, but the effect was similar. Driving became a nightmare. 2 firemen lost their lives when this fire engine was hit by a tree. Damage ran into millions of pounds. Aircraft flipped over like toys. This was Brighton. A huge clearing up operation awaited workmen the next day. Teachers disrupted the classrooms in 1987 as they fought for more pay. Here, a half-day strike in Berkshire.
A third of Berkshire's 3,000 teachers filed into the Hexagon at Reading. They're protesting against the Education Secretary, Kenneth Baker, imposing a pay deal on them through Parliament. Some 80,000 school children in 400 schools were affected, while the teachers skipped lessons for the morning.
At last, the news all serious drinkers had been waiting for. Pubs were to stay open all day, as in Scotland. 11 in the morning until 11 at night. Drinkers enjoyed the continental-style approach. The family living in this house thought the 80s were too dangerous to enjoy a normal life. The only safe option, they decided, was to convert their house into a nuclear shelter.
Inside this mound of earth, there's a new house like yours and mine, except this one can withstand nuclear attack. There's a front door where you might hang a sign saying, "Done roaming," or more likely, "Done civilization," as we now know it.
No, if it happens, it'll be a case of what myself and my husband do together. I won't give much thought to anyone else, really. I shouldn't think at the time.
And then there was Beastie Boy mania. Wherever the American pop group went, their loyal fans followed. There were stories about fans taking badges from cars, and the Beasties didn't like the press.
Yeah, the press make it all up, you know.
Let's go on to the next question.
If people in England aren't aware of that yet, I think it's pretty sad, because the press council doesn't mean a damn thing.
Yoko Ono visited the Greenham Common peace campaigners in Berkshire and pledged her full support. Eventually, the Americans did remove their cruise missiles from Greenham Common.
December the 12th, 1988, the Clapham rail disaster. 35 people from the south died when a commuter train from Poole ran into the back of another from Basingstoke.
There was a woman screaming, who was buried under a load of metal and rubbish. I think she's lost her hand.
A great big explosion. Someone fell on my nose. I fractured my nose.
I landed up on somebody underneath me, and that was it. It was just carnage.
British Rail was prosecuted by the Health and Safety Executive, fined £250,000 for failing to ensure the safety of passengers and staff. A huge explosion ripped through the BDH chemical plant at Poole. The salmonella scare had a drastic effect on egg sales. And some schools banned eggs from their menus after Edwina Curry's warning over salmonella. Mrs. Curry, of course, later resigned.
Question C, then. We have a question on historical...
Still in schools, there was a new test in the classroom, the GCSE. It replaced the O-level and the CSE, a combination of classroom work and the written exam.
Here at Portsmouth Grammar School, 110 fifth formers have become the school guinea pigs at this first ever test of the GCSE.
Well, I thought that the exam was much easier than what we'd had as O-level specimen papers.
Well, I think it's very much fairer than the O-level because there's less emphasis on the exam stage and the continual assessment through the course.
Later, though, the high pass rate led to claims that the GCSEs were far too easy. A pub in Berkshire caused a stir by daring to impose a smoking ban in the lounge. Television presenter Jenny Hanley was behind the scheme.
This whole area has been booked out by one private party this evening who want Brahms on the piano. They'd like a buffet, and they'll just sit here in a smoke-free atmosphere and watch the plants grow.
And the first mother and daughter team to fly and wing walk together took to the skies in 1988.
Lovely, absolutely heavenly. I could hardly breathe. I must say, when it went like that, my heart went in my mouth.
And the intrepid duo's feat raised £15,000 for charity. 70s teeny bop idol Donny Osmond visited the South to see if any of his records were still on the shelves. DJ Bruno Brooks gave him a helping hand. Cliff Richard told us how he plans to keep going for the next 100 years, following his huge Christmas hit, the year's biggest selling record, Mistletoe and Wine. Then, just when we thought we'd seen about everything, Ben, the collie, showed us he was just an old sea dog.
(1989), the Purley train crash. Only months after the Clapham disaster, this tragedy in Surrey. A train from Horsham pulled out of Purley station 3 minutes late. As it crossed onto the fast lane, it was hit by the service from Littlehampton. That train then plunged down a 50-foot embankment, killing 5 passengers. The driver of the Littlehampton train later admitted passing through a red signal. The Berlin Wall, the terrifying dividing line between East and West, came down in 1989. This olive branch was part of the perestroika process, Coast to Coast sent a camera team to witness the historic moment.
This is the wall by Checkpoint Charlie, and one of the benefits of coming to Berlin is that you can actually take home a piece of history for yourself to keep. And with the East German Guards only a few yards away, there are plenty of grim reminders of what might have happened to souvenir hunters only a few weeks ago.
Acid house parties were all the rage. Tickets cost upwards of £20, but that didn't deter partygoers. The determination of the organisers to stage the events in remote spots didn't deter the police either, who followed relentlessly. And Coast to Coast joined the chase to find an acid house party.
Whatever the legalities of the situation, the party did finally get underway at 4:10, with police guarding one door of the warehouse and ticket holders scrambling through another, which had apparently been forced. Where acid house will strike next is anyone's guess.
The BSB satellite was launched. Squarials were made ready for sale. And at its Southampton base, the company was looking forward to a bright future. It wasn't to be. A spectacular fire at Uphark House, the stately home in Sussex. Millions of pounds worth of damage. But the building was to be fully restored. Steve McCarthy, the Southampton boxer, received the most powerful blow of his career. The mother of opponent Tony Wilson decided that instead of throwing in the towel, she would put her high heels to good use. The winner's the Wilson corner. There have been more popular decisions. Cyril Hubbard, a Dorset farmer, wanted his sheep to feel relaxed while he clipped their toenails. The answer, a deck chair.
It's much quicker for me. Secondly, you can see the sheep are quite comfortable and restrained. They don't fight or kick, as they do sometimes when they're on the ground. And I can inspect them and leave them whilst they go off and get something. Whereas normally, if you've got a sheep between your legs, you can't move.
Pat Bradford from Barton-on-Sea in Hampshire wanted to take her disabled husband out for walks. But how would she keep up with his electric wheelchair?
I didn't want him not to be able to go out, so I thought a skateboard. And I thought, no, a skateboard's no good, I can't control it. So then I thought roller skates, and this is what we do. He tows me, and we can go anywhere within the limit of the chair, which is 7.5 miles out, 7.5 miles back, as long as I don't forget to charge it.
After the 1987 hurricane, the South could have expected a few hundred years' grace before the next one. However, along came another in January 1990. More devastation throughout the South. Hampshire policeman Chief Inspector John Smith was killed when his car was crushed by a tree near Winchester. Our own reporter Chris Wilson had an astonishing escape when a tree hit his car.
I had to lie across the seats to avoid getting crushed by the roof. Not really a pretty sight, and as you can see, I think I was pretty lucky, really.
And as Gary Cotterell reported, tennis domes disappeared over the horizon.
There's expense too for the management of Europa Tennis Centre in Southampton. This morning the courts were covered by two giant domes. First one went, then the other. There was a police badminton match going on at the time.
Wind speeds in the south topped 100 miles an hour. Families of people trapped in Iraq and Kuwait were horrified to see their loved ones paraded on Iraqi television. Little children formed part of Saddam's human shield. The Pilkingtons from the Isle of Wight, the reluctant stars of Saddam's TV broadcasts, were set free along with hundreds of other hostages.
I mean, there was nothing, just 4 walls and a floor, that was it. And we started from scratch.
How about the food?
We lived on aubergines for about 2 months. That was really it.
The boy who met Saddam was back too. But the Gulf crisis would soon escalate into war. The IRA murdered one of the South's MPs. Ian Gow, the member for Eastbourne, was killed by a car bomb. Prime Minister Mrs. Thatcher warned other MPs to be on their guard. Protests against the poll tax were held throughout the South. At Southampton, the anti-poll tax lobby managed to get into the council meeting, and the chairman had no chance of keeping order. Crowd control proved a headache for Dorset police as Leeds fans ran riot in Bournemouth. The police had advised against a Bournemouth-Leeds match on Bank Holiday Monday. It was an intimidating sight for 700 officers drafted in from 5 police forces. Our reporter Fiona Oates described the scene.
After several charges, police managed to contain the fans. So far, there have been around 20 injuries, including 2 police officers. Ambulance men said they too came under attack.
England soccer fans at home let the side down during the World Cup finals. The riots claimed 2 lives. A TVS crew was attacked during filming in Brighton. It all followed the national side's defeat by West Germany. British Airways pilot Tim Lancaster was the luckiest pilot alive in 1990. 2 windows blew out of his windscreen over Southampton and he was sucked out onto the fuselage. Captain Lancaster's crew prevented him plunging 25,000 feet to his death. 1990 also saw Tracy Edwards' triumph in Maiden. Brighton boxer Chris Eubanks' rise to world champion. A royal visitor or 2. Corn circles. And a heat wave.
January 1991, and the news all service families in the South dreaded. War broke out in the Gulf. Saddam Hussein had refused to budge from Kuwait, and as the Allies' deadline approached, it became obvious there was only one solution. The Allied pilots' first real strike into enemy territory was an air raid on Baghdad. At sea, the Portsmouth-based destroyers HMS Gloucester and HMS Cardiff prepared for action. And on land, Operation Desert Storm changed the face of the local landscape. But the war still seemed a long way away to many people until aircrews from the south went missing in action. Flight Lieutenant John Peters from Petersfield in Hampshire was given up for dead when his Tornado was shot down. But the pilot was captured by the Iraqis and in a distressed state forced to appear on Iraqi television. But soon John was free, to the relief of his friends and family and indeed the entire country. But the war machine kept rolling on. And after the air assaults, the land war began. Huge columns of coalition forces headed for Kuwait. There were casualties, but these were very low for a war on this scale. It was our reporter Guy Phillips who was one of the first journalists to witness the devastation caused by the Iraqis in Kuwait. Guy was on board the Portsmouth-based minehunter HMS Catistock, sent in after the city was liberated.
You can feel the oil in your hair, the taste at the back of your mouth. This is what you get if you set fire to more than 500 oil wells.
At home, 10 people were killed in a pile-up on the M4 near Hungerford in Berkshire. The accident happened in thick fog at about 7 in the morning. Police said, as usual, drivers were travelling far too fast for the conditions. Altogether, 20 cars and 3 lorries were involved. And in April, 6 Portsmouth fishermen lost their lives in a tragedy that shook the south. Their trawler, the Wilhelmina J, was struck by a Cypriot-registered freighter, the Zulfiqar, off Newhaven. The ship did not stop, and her crew had failed to report the collision for 2 hours. The captain and first mate of the Zulfiqar appeared in a Cypriot court, but were cleared of failing to stop and walked free. However, official British reports into the tragedy condemned the Zulfiqar's crew. October the 16th, 1991 was a critical day for TVS. The company lost its franchise to broadcast to the south and southeast. TVS made a huge cash bid for the franchise, but
Meridian's got it.
Meridian Broadcasting will take over from TVS in January 1993. And 70-year-old Bert Rose, signed by Southampton in 1938, wanted another chance of stardom. Saints laid on a full training session for Bert, and despite Ian Bradford offering record terms,
What'd you play for, fiver?
the club decided he wasn't quite first-team material.
1992, Hove. A party during the Easter bank holiday weekend turned into an inferno. 5 people lost their lives at the flat in Palmyra Avenue. There was no fire escape, although the council had asked the owners to build one as long ago as 1988. An inquest jury decided that the 5 who died had been killed unlawfully. A verdict of suicide was returned on the man who started the fire, Trevor Carrington. He threw himself in front of a lorry. Hove Council was severely criticised in an independent report into the tragedy. Its response was to take on extra staff and set up a special fire prevention team. A sizable task for them. There are 4,000 privately owned houses like these in Hove. Dr. Nigel Cox, a consultant rheumatologist in Winchester, was found guilty of attempted murder. His crime, administering a lethal dose of potassium chloride to pensioner Lillian Boys, a terminally ill patient. She was given the drug by Dr. Cox at the Royal Hampshire County Hospital. Mrs. Boys, who suffered from rheumatoid arthritis, was in acute pain. Dr. Cox was found guilty of attempted murder and given a 12-month suspended prison sentence.
Clearly, I'm devastated by a verdict of guilty and a suspended prison sentence for what was really a bona fide action that was solely in the interest of Mrs. Boys. It seems somewhat harsh to criminalise me for doing what was my best in quite exceptional circumstances.
The General Medical Council decided that Dr. Cox should not be struck off, and the Wessex Regional Health Authority decided that the doctor could return to his job under certain conditions. The recession hit hard in the south in 1992. The government announced that 1,000 jobs were to go at Portland Naval Base in Dorset. And 400 fleet maintenance jobs were lost at Portsmouth. The Ferguson factory at Gosport closed with the loss of over 700 jobs, despite a campaign by a furious workforce. The troubled Gatwick airline Dan Air was taken over by British Airways, although BA said 1,400 jobs would have to go. Thousands of householders in the south found that their properties were worth less than their mortgage, a burden known as negative equity. Many homes had been bought at inflated prices during the boom of the 80s. These values plummeted, meaning that many people were trapped. They couldn't afford to move. And those who could afford a new house stayed put because of the uncertainty of the market. A nightmare for builders, estate agents and beleaguered homeowners. Voters in the south went to the polls in the general election, a heroine's welcome for Mrs. Thatcher.
Nice to be campaigning for someone else.
Although it ended up like a rugby scrum. A flying egg caught Mr. Major unawares. John Denham became the only Labour MP in the south when he took Southampton Itchen from Chris Choke. Royal Life Insurance agent Bob Kissane told his clients to trust him. They did, and lost thousands of pounds. At Winchester Crown Court, Kissane was jailed for 2.5 years after obtaining £330,000 by deception. Protesters, young and old, lined up for a final showdown with the government over the extension to the M3 at Winchester. As the bulldozers began carving out the route through Twyford Down, middle-class Conservative voters joined environmental groups in an unsuccessful attempt to save the historic site from the advancing tons of concrete. The fastest milkman in the West, Benny Hill, died after a short illness. The Hampshire comedian was buried in his family grave. In sport, England hero Alan Shearer left Southampton for Blackburn Rovers, the fee a record-breaking £3.6 million. In the Barcelona Olympics, gold and bronze for Sally Gunnell from Sussex. The Hampshire athlete Chris Akabusi collected a bronze. Dancer, the footballing horse, thrilled us with his skill, but no offers so far from South Coast clubs. And this cycle speedway rider seriously considered giving up the sport. It almost got him again, but his new, more cautious stance ensured a more or less trouble-free getaway.